June of 2009, Kenny Ortega had 80 hours of rehearsal footage of Michael Jackson, behind-the-scenes moments, private conversations, Michael being himself when he thought nobody was watching. Sony paid $60 million for the rights. They released a 111-minute documentary called This Is It. That means 79 hours were left on the cutting room floor. What happened to the footage they didn't show? What was Michael doing in those hours? And why did some of his dancers say the documentary showed a version of Michael they'd never seen in rehearsals? This is what they cut out, and why it matters. Footage was never supposed to be released. Documentarian Sandrine Orabona and Tim Patterson were filming rehearsals at the Staples Center and the Forum in Los Angeles from March through June of 2009. The cameras were there to capture reference footage from Michael and Kenny Ortega, notes for themselves, a private archive from Michael's library. Then Michael died on June 25th, 2009. Kenny Ortega received a phone call during rehearsals. He made the person repeat it 3 times because he thought he was hearing voices. It didn't feel real, Ortega later said. It was surreal. Then I said, you know what, I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call you back. And if this is really you, then you're going to answer the phone and then I'm going to know it's the truth. It was real. Michael Jackson was gone, and suddenly 80 hours of private rehearsal footage became the only visual record of his final days. Sony approached the estate. They wanted to make a documentary. Kenny Ortega would direct it. They'd edit together the best moments, the most powerful performances, and release it as a tribute to Michael. In late July of 2009, Ortega started editing. He worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. He had to deliver the film by early October. 2.5 months to turn 80 hours of raw footage into a finished documentary. But here's what most people don't know. Not all 80 hours were of Michael rehearsing. Kenny Ortega revealed in an interview that nowhere near the 80 hours did we have Michael in rehearsal. Some of it was film footage Michael and Ortega had produced for special content to appear in the concert. Some was behind-the-scenes interviews with crew members, sets going up, the show being built, extensive documentation of the production process. And some of it was Michael being himself, off camera, unguarded, raw. According to Ortega, they had 120 hours of footage total when you include all the concert film elements. But the 80 hours of rehearsal and behind-the-scenes material was what Sony bought for $60 million. The documentary that was released showed Michael at the top of his game, nailing every song, every move, every note. Roger Ebert wrote that the film didn't show a sick and drugged man forcing himself through grueling rehearsals, but a spirit embodied by music. But people who were there during those rehearsals tell a different story. Karen Fay, Michael's makeup artist for 27 years, testified during the AEG wrongful death trial that Michael was paranoid and talking to himself in his final days. She'd never seen him like that before. Kenny Ortega sent an email to AEG executives on June 14th, 2009, 11 days before Michael died. The email expressed concern about Michael's health. He wrote that Michael had strong signs of paranoia, anxiety, and obsessive-like behavior. Dancers reported that Michael was constantly cold. He'd wear multiple layers of clothing in a heated building. "I'm cold," he'd say over and over. A sign his body was failing? None of that made it into the documentary. In interviews, Kenny Ortega was asked directly if there were parts of Michael he didn't want to show. His answer was revealing. It's unguarded and it's raw, and it's real, and it's truthful, and it's not always pretty, and he's not always lit, Ortega said. We weren't really overly protective. But then he added something important. It has soul and heart and truth and warmth and magic. Translation, they cut the parts that didn't have soul, heart, truth, warmth, and magic. They cut the parts where Michael looked sick, where he looked tired, where he looked like a 50-year-old man being worked to death. According to multiple sources, there were moments during rehearsals where Michael couldn't finish songs, where he'd stop mid-performance and ask for a break, where his voice would crack or his energy would fade. One crew member, speaking anonymously years later, said there were days when Michael would show up to rehearsals and barely be able to stand. Dr. Conrad Murray would be there in the background, watching, waiting. Another dancer said Michael would sometimes forget lyrics, not because he didn't know them, but because he was so medicated, he couldn't focus. The documentary shows him flubbing lyrics during the Jackson 5 medley and saying his earpiece wasn't working properly. But according to people who were there, the earpiece was fine. The footage also captured Michael's interactions with Kenny Ortega. And according to some who viewed the raw footage, those interactions weren't always the "I agree" Michael dynamic that made it into the final cut. There were arguments, creative disagreements, moments of tension where you could see Michael was being pushed beyond his limits. All of it was cut. This Is It was released on DVD in January of 2010. It included bonus features, extended rehearsal footage, behind-the-scenes moments. According to Kenny Ortega, there was a tremendous, weighty additional footage on the DVD that wasn't in the theatrical release. But even the DVD didn't show everything. Fans who analyzed the footage noticed something strange. There were cuts, jump cuts in the middle of performances, moments where the camera angle would suddenly change or the audio would skip a beat. Those weren't creative editing choices. Those were places where something had been removed. One extended clip that appeared after the credits showed Michael rehearsing Human Nature a couple of weeks before his death. In that clip, Michael looks different than he does in the rest of the documentary. Thinner, frailer, his voice softer. It was included as a bonus, not as part of the main film, because it didn't fit the narrative Sony and the estate wanted to tell. The narrative was simple. Michael Jackson was ready. He was at the top of his game. The shows would have been incredible. His death was a tragedy, but he died doing what he loved. The truth was more complicated. In the AEG wrongful death trial that took place from April to October of 2013, multiple dancers and crew members testified about what they saw during rehearsals. Michael Durham Prince, one of Michael's dancers, said they were planning to tour with Invincible. But then Michael started showing signs that he couldn't handle it. Travis Payne, Michael's lead choreographer, said on the record that Michael was on fire during the June 24th rehearsal, his final rehearsal. But Payne also testified that there were earlier rehearsals where Michael wasn't on fire, where he was struggling. None of those earlier rehearsals made it into This Is It. The documentary shows a version of Michael Jackson that the people closest to him say wasn't always accurate. It shows the best moments, the triumphant moments, the moments where he looked like the king of pop. But 80 hours of footage means there were a lot of other moments, quiet moments, human moments, moments where Michael wasn't performing for anyone. According to people who viewed the raw footage before it was edited, there were scenes of Michael sitting alone between takes, staring off into space, looking exhausted, looking scared. There were scenes of him talking to Kenny Ortega about how overwhelming the pressure was, about how he felt like he was running out of time. There were scenes of Dr. Conrad Murray in the background, always there, always watching. All of it was cut. Jackson family didn't endorse This Is It. Some fans boycotted it. They felt it was ghoulish to profit from Michael's death. They felt Sony was exploiting his legacy. But the film made $267.9 million worldwide. It became the highest grossing documentary film of all time. DVD sales reached 2.8 million units in the first year. The estate had to make a choice: show the world everything, or show the world a version of Michael Jackson that protected his legacy. They chose legacy. Kenny Ortega said during interviews that he wasn't trying to validate Michael or defend him. He was trying to tell a story, but the story he told was incomplete. The footage they cut wasn't cut because it was boring. It was cut because it showed a different Michael, a vulnerable Michael, a Michael who was being controlled, manipulated, and worked to death. And the estate, Sony and Kenny Ortega, made a collective decision. The world didn't need to see that Michael. 80 hours of footage, 111 minutes of documentary. That means over 98% of what was filmed will never be seen by the public. Is it buried in a vault somewhere? Has it been destroyed? Will the estate ever release it? Nobody knows. But what we do know is this, that this is it. Documentary shows us a version of Michael Jackson that makes us feel good. It makes us believe he was ready, that he was happy, that his death was an unexpected tragedy that stole him from us at the peak of his powers. The footage they cut would tell a different story, a story about a man who knew he was dying, who was being pushed beyond his limits, who tried to tell people he needed help and nobody listened. 79 hours of Michael Jackson's final days exist somewhere, and the people who've seen it made a choice not to share it with you. Maybe that was the right choice. Maybe we don't need to see Michael at his lowest. Maybe the documentary we got is the tribute he deserves. But don't mistake it for the whole truth. Because the footage they cut out isn't just missing, it's hidden. And there's a reason for that. If you want to hear more untold stories about the legends who changed music history, like and subscribe to King of Pop. Stay tuned for more content.